And thank you all for joining us. This is a digital lab from CE National. My name is Eric Miller, and I'm the Director of Ministry Operations. I have with me Nick Deck, who is the youth pastor at Winona Lake Grace Brethren Church. We're excited today to talk about video games. So Nick's got a TV behind him. We're going to play some video games right there. No, I wish that were true. Actually, we're talking to parents, to adults today. If you have any questions on engaging a video gamer in your life, then this is the digital lab for you. So on behalf of CE National and Nick Deck and myself, we are glad that you're joining us today. We're excited to talk about video games because oftentimes people don't really know. If you're not a gamer, I am not a gamer, I will admit. I think I played like Tiger Woods golf on the Nintendo Wii when that came out, and that was about it. Maybe old school Tecmo football on the Nintendo. So that's about it for me. But we're talking about how do you engage your students when all they want to do is play video games. And so we're in the midst of summer. Nick, you probably have students in your youth ministry that parents would say they don't come out of their room for days. Or they stay up all night playing video games.
Oh yeah.
So how do you engage? That's the topic of our conversation today. And so we're excited that you're joining us. Again, we want to make reference that for all of these digital labs, if you're joining us on Zoom, looks like we got a couple people here. And then on Facebook, if you're watching us, drop a question for us in the comment box on Facebook or in the Q&A box here on Zoom. We'd love to answer those questions for you. So, Nick, you and I go way back, man. High school, middle school, maybe elementary school. I grew up in Winona Lake, where Nick is the youth pastor at now, and it was so fun when you were in high school and in college. Not only did you disciple me, but I remember going to Tokens and Tickets. You worked there, and we played video games together. And,
yeah, we did.
Pinball, like the racing. I remember some of those. So tell us just briefly, what's your story in regards to video games? Why are you so passionate about gamers and even reaching them for Christ?
Yeah, that's a great question, Eric. And thanks for having me. So glad to be here. First of all, I think gamers are obviously, I don't want to say a category, but a category of students, of people that obviously need the gospel and need Christ the same way anyone does, whether they're a basketball player or a rugby player or a chess player or whatever it is. Everyone needs to be engaged with the gospel. And I often see this kind of a subgenre, there you go, subgenre of people being left behind or left out or neglected and often just looked down on, even though esports is bigger than it has ever been and only escalating incredibly quickly. It's often these students are left behind, left out, and marginalized just because most of our older generations have a difficult time understanding and relating to them as students, as people, because their interests are just so different and so other than what they've known and what they've been used to it and grown up with. So I've seen some really good conversations with students about video games, which we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. But so I see it as a passion to reach these students that often most other areas of our culture kind of marginalize or shun or look down on, but they need the gospel the same way we all do.
Yeah, Nick, why do you think that is? Why do you think that there's a negative, a subculture is good, that's a good word, but like a negative connotation towards students who play video games or even who are addicted to video games? Maybe that's part of the stereotype, but why do you think that is?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of it has to do with media. Anytime I shouldn't say anytime, hoping to not get political with this, don't want that. But oftentimes when there's a school shooting or something of that nature and someone is involved, the media will be quick to be like, and they played Call of Duty for 12 hours a day, like their whole life. Like, did they though? Do you know that? Like, you can't prove that. They had a poster of this video game in their basement. Well, so what? And they often will kind of build up these strong men out of video games, because, well, where'd they learn how to shoot? They must have been playing video games that taught them how to shoot. Like, they're very different. It doesn't really collate at all. So I often see video games being brought up as the bad guy in situations like that. And I think that has sort of put a stigma on this idea of gaming. Also, often, again, in popular media, video gamers were portrayed as these kind of gross guys who are in their 30s, living in their parents' basement and only play video games. They don't have a job. They don't have responsibilities. They just kind of glean off their parents and don't do anything except play video games. That is not the majority of the case. If that is the case, that's not okay. We've got some bigger issues there than just video games. Let's be honest about that, right? So we kind of see these really negative stereotypes portrayed in popular media often, I think, that feed to that negative viewpoint of people that play video games.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, and especially for our discussion today, we're talking about students who, for many of them, video games are even a gift that their parents have given them. They got a Nintendo Switch or, something like that where they can be positive things. I mean, I remember when I was in elementary school, I think my parents got a Nintendo, and what a blast we had playing video games together as a family. And yet it definitely seems to be this switch in our culture today, where video games are viewed as so negative, and like anything in life, right? When it's to an extreme, when there's an addiction, when you worship something, it becomes an idol. All of that can absolutely turn into a negative, but inherently, it doesn't necessarily mean it's evil or sinful or something that's bad. So,
right.
Yeah. So Nick, I'm just curious, before we dive in here, build some credibility with our viewers. What games do you enjoy playing? I already revealed my cards. People have already dismissed me as a credible.
You have no cards.
So what are your games? What are you into? What do you enjoy playing?
Yeah. Well, a little bit of background. I grew up on the Nintendo. Did some Atari before that.
Okay.
Nintendo. Mario 3 was such a favorite for me. And to this day, I still claim to be the best Mario 3 player in the world. And I will happily challenge anyone to that. If you want to meet that challenge, that's fine with me. I love Mario 3. Beyond that, loved games. I played a World of Warcraft for a while, was big into that. I love MMOs. For those that don't know, that stands for Massive Multiplayer Online, MMO. Love MMOs. So World of Warcraft is one of those. There's another one that I loved. I played it for almost 10 years called City of Heroes, where you can basically just be a superhero, fly around and like save people and stop crimes and fight supervillains. Might be my life ambition to be a superhero. So I love that game. But as far as some more gamer type games, I'm a big fan of the Dark Souls series. I played all 3 Dark Souls games and have acquired all the achievements for all 3 of those games. Very excited about Demon Souls coming out. Again, that sounds very scary. We've got the word demon in it here on a Christian-based podcast, but it's really just another term for monster in this gaming genre. So those are some big ones for me. I've loved the Batman series. Minecraft. I think I said that once already. I've got a lot. Right now, I've really been loving, there's one that I do on Steam called Slay the Spire. That's a good one. I'm very much looking forward to a game coming out called Ashes of Creation. That's going to be a new MMO as well. It was funded on Kickstarter and through Kickstarter. And I believe it was one of the highest funded things on Kickstarter in the past like 8 or 9 years or something. They got millions of dollars in a matter of days because their idea for gaming is so desired and wanted. They really want to focus on having an MMO that's not pay to win. And again, for those that don't know, that means often games, especially on our devices these days, the more money you pay, the better you can be at the game. And people that are actually into games, we really hate that, because I'm not going to dump $5,000 into a game that doesn't prove anything. That just proves I have money to waste, and I don't. Not that. So they're committed to having a game that's not pay to win, but still incredibly immersive and detailed. So I'm really excited about that game coming out.
Nice. I've literally not heard of any of those. So Mario 3, I got you. We can talk about that. But the rest. So I think that even leads into a question, like for parents, for youth pastors, youth workers, people who aren't familiar with the gaming culture. How do they learn about these games? How do they engage? How do you even start a conversation with the student that's big into these games where we're not speaking the same language? What do you do with that?
Yeah, I think to make it maybe as relatable and applicable as possible. So here's an example. But what's funny, I'm actually not going to use video games. I'm going to use a card game instead that I knew nothing about. So a friend of mine that I didn't really know really well, but I knew that he needed Christ. He was not a Christian. But he was really into this card game, like really into this like trading card game. And I knew nothing about it, but that's all he would talk about. And he would spend all his money on this game. That's all he would do. And I thought, and I would try to talk with him about it, but like I didn't know anything. So I thought, if I'm going to have a relationship with this guy, I need to invest in what he's interested in. So I bought the game. I had him teach me how to play. I put some money into it. And we ended up playing a lot together and having conversations. And we would even go to tournaments together. And I would lose every time, and he would win every time. But eventually, we were able to relate on a different level besides just the game. But the game helped us relate together, and it gave us a foundation of shared experiences. Things we could joke about, things we could talk about, things I could text him about. Dude, I just got this card. Oh my gosh, it's so cool. Stuff like that. And eventually, because of that, he started coming to church here with me. And eventually he became a follower of Christ through something that somebody shared that wasn't even me, which is awesome. But now he's a follower of Christ. Is it because I cared enough to play this card game with him? I don't know. God's going to do what he wants. But I know that he used me in some way to build a relationship with this guy that's in my life now that would have been before if I wouldn't have invested in that way. So back up to kind of make the applicable steps. One, I found out the name of what he was really interested in. If it's a video game, that's the first goal, figuring out the name, right? And then two, I looked it up. I just started doing some research. Like, okay, how do you actually play this? What is it all about? Like, what's the community like? What's going on here? And I started learning. And then I finally bought the game myself. I invested in it. And then I asked him to teach me how to play or to give me some pointers. And anytime we can put ourselves in the role of a learner and let this person that we're interested in take on the role of a teacher, it kind of has like that feel of authority, which can be so empowering and so good at relationship building. And especially if we are willing to be humble enough to say, I don't know anything. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. Will you show me what to do? And even though I'm going to make mistakes and not like get upset or whatever, especially when it's our own kids teaching us, that can feel really awkward. But if we can be humble enough and patient enough to set our pride aside and to know that we're going to lose all the time, we're going to be no good, they're always going to be better than us, that's okay, because the goal isn't winning. The goal is relationship. The goal is relating. The goal is building a foundation of shared experiences so that we can build that foundation and have and develop a more deep or more full relationship based on their interests instead of what we think it should be based on. That make sense?
Yeah, no, that's really good. So play that out a little bit more. Okay? If you are a parent, right, and your student loves playing video games, if you're the parent, how can maybe the parents have bought the game for the kids, Do you think students are open for their parents to play video games with them?
I think this is a great question. Well, let's use Fortnite as an example. That's most likely what most of the students around are playing, Fortnite or Apex. For those that don't know what those are first-person shooter games. You're kind of thrown into an open world with a set number of other players, maybe 30 or so, and you try to survive to the end. And it's very cartoony and kind of fun, and you pick up weapons and try to take out the other players. So I think students maybe every student is going to be different. I remember when I was playing Mario 3, I didn't necessarily want my dad to play Mario 3 with me, but when he asked if he could, I was like, you want to play this game with me? Like, really? Like, yeah, I'll show you how to play. Yeah. And he was terrible. He was the worst. But it was fine. We had a great time together laughing and talking, and it was really cool. So do students want their parents to play? Maybe not necessarily. Do they want their parents to engage with them in some way? Absolutely. Whether they know it or not. Parents, your students want you to engage with them, especially when they act like they don't. I promise. I promise they do. This is something my wife and I have to keep telling ourselves about our daughter that's with us. Your students want you to engage, even when they act like you don't. So just got to feel it out. So I think, yeah, some students really would love for you to come alongside and say, hey, teach me how to play Fortnite. Show me what to do. Like, what's a great weapon to use, or where do I hide? Like, what should I do? And just put yourself in that role. I think students would love that. Yeah.
I think you even touched on this a minute ago too, in explaining, like, if you go in with the attitude like I want to learn, and so I'm going to ask a lot of questions. I know I'm going to be terrible. I know I'm going to lose. So those parents who maybe are highly competitive and want to win, that's okay. But know that have a good attitude. Don't be a sore loser about it. But make a your attitude, I think, going into that matters. Where, I remember my parents, playing video games with me, and actually on some of them, like on Tetris or Dr. Mario, like my parents were better at that stuff than I was because of the coordination or whatever that was needed. And yet for games today, most kids are going to destroy their parents or youth pastor or whoever in these games. But that's good. And so I'm hearing you say, like, take advantage of that and leverage that to just laugh and connect and enjoy each other's company.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually have a small story of a student, and I can't remember the game right now, but they were playing a game and their dad said, oh, I want to teach me how to play, and just kept getting obliterated. He's pretty competitive. He secretly got the game on his own, played it a ton, and got really good at it without telling his kids, and then popped back in and just smoked him. And they're like, Dad? Like, what happened? He's like, I don't know. And like, it's hilarious. Like, what a memory that those kids have now because of that. That's so cool that their dad was willing to do that. And yeah, maybe it was a pride thing for him, but he was still engaging with his kids, and like they were having fun together. Like, that's really cool. Now, can every parent do that? Absolutely not. No, you can't. Right. There's ways to engage and get involved like that. Yeah.
So go there. What would be some of those other ways that for the parent they're not going to learn how to play the game. Maybe they're willing to do it together, to spend time with them while their students are playing video games. But what would those other ways that you would recommend that parents or adults engage with students who enjoy video games?
Yeah, that's so good. That's such a good question. Most students that are playing games are rarely playing games by themselves. isolated and not online playing with other people. Back that up to mean that most students and most people, when they play games, they want at least someone to see what they're doing, to see how they're progressing, and to see how good they are or aren't, and to see what they're achieving. So take that back, parents or youth pastors or adults. Sit beside the student as they play and ask questions, not like, what's that? What's that? Not constantly annoying them, but say, hey, like, what's going on right now? And like kind of get involved. If there's a story, like parents, probably you have a kid right now who might be really into The Last of Us 2. There's an incredible story into this game. It's a sequel to a game that came out about 5 or 6 years ago. The story is remarkable. And there's some ungodly things in it, like there is in any secular story. That could be a great way to have conversations with your students, with your kids, about some real issues of life. And you could help them put a kind of a biblical perspective on these big ideas by asking, what's going on in this story? And don't just judge the story, well, that's wrong. Yes, we can get there eventually, but ask them to and share, okay, so what's your goal right now? Oh, how do you feel about that? Like, what do you think about that? And really get to engage with them and how they're responding to the story, how they're responding to their actions that they're taking as a character in the game. And just kind of watch how they play and ask questions based on that and kind of engage with them as they're playing the game instead of necessarily you having to play the game with them. That's a good way around that. If you just have no way to play, you're like, it's never going to happen. You can always learn and ask questions and watch them play the game. And we know that students want this because you can go on Twitch, on YouTube. There are millions of streamers out there. Streamers, that's just a word for people who are live streaming a video game that they're playing. The same way we're live streaming this right now, you can live stream playing a video game. People will watch someone playing a video game. That's it, because everybody wants to be seen as they're doing something that they're proud of or that they like or that they enjoy. So sit down next to your student and just watch, ask some questions.
That's so good, because I think you're really helping us as adults, especially those of us who don't understand, the desire to play video games, dive deeper into what's going on in our hearts and in our minds, and the core values, the things that we long for, right?
Absolutely.
Right? They want their parents to be proud of them about the things that they accomplished. They want to hear that. They want that affirmation. And so if we can leverage video games as a way to do that, then that's great. Nick, I think there's something to this too. The idea, as you were explaining that, I had this picture in my mind of doing life together. And Operation Barnabas, which is one of our ministry training programs that CE National puts on. It's going on this week, and I can see even out my window, there's Operation Barnabas students roaming around the CE campus doing work projects today. There's a training thing that we often as leaders use, that when you confront a student or you engage in a conversation with the student, if it's one-on-one, face-to-face, it can feel very intimidating for anybody, right?
Yeah.
But when you're shoulder to shoulder and you're side by side and you're working on something together, that conversation, even if it's the same, it feels less intimidating. And for most of us, it's our human nature. We're able to engage more. We're able to receive more from it. And so even in this idea of video games, when you're shoulder to shoulder in front of a TV and you're engaging in something together, but you can have a conversation, that's amazing. That's
absolutely
a principle. Yeah.
And something I do want to address that. I want to back up to something else you said, this idea of affirmation and wanting affirmation when we accomplish goals, right? So often parents, are so excited when their kid is on the soccer team and they go and they watch all their games. It's still a game. And they cheer so crazy loud when they score and they kick a soccer goal unit. I don't know. I don't do sports at all, right?
It's perfect.
so excited for that, right? And they give them the affirmation, they're cheering and yeah, you did such a great job at the game today. That was amazing, right? Why can't parents have the same level of excitement and enthusiasm for electronic gaming? It still takes hours of practice, a lot of self-discipline, a lot of focus to do some of these games in a successful way. Now, I'm not saying that to let your kids use that as an excuse to get away with playing games they shouldn't be playing, or for playing for hours and hours and hours. That's ridiculous, because I honestly think the amount of time that students and people put into sports is absurd and sinful. But that's not what this is about. But I think if parents can show and share that same level of affirmation for some of the games that their kids are really invested in, I don't see a problem with that, especially when they know that they're having these conversations and know that their student is working towards this goal in a game. And when they meet that goal, celebrate with them. Be like, oh man, that's awesome. That's a great job. High five, show me. Or like, how do you feel? Like, that's so great. Like, what's your next goal? Engage with them in that way.
Yeah.
But Eric, what you said about the shoulder to shoulder, absolutely. The best conversations I've had with our daughter is when we're driving side by side. Either I'm teaching her how to drive, or she's just in the passenger seat next to me as we're going to get tacos, or we're going to the store, or whatever it is. And it's so much easier to engage together when our focus is on something here instead of on each other. You're absolutely right. The same is true with campfires, right? We have so many good conversations with students over the years around campfires, because you're focused on this central movement that holds your attention. It's not just a blank wall, but it's movement. It's engaging a little bit. You can kind of mess around it and poke it and play with the fire. It does wonders for conversation. You're absolutely right. And video games can do the same thing.
Yeah. So even I think, to help some of our adults that maybe are thinking, how do we engage our gamers? Nick, even to take that one step further and dive a little deeper and thinking about just sitting with them while they're playing, even if you're not asking questions about the game, even if you're not playing with them, do you think it's possible to still engage in a spiritual conversation with your students while they're playing a video game?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. I mean, it depends on how focused they need to be, right? If they're in the middle of a League of Legends tournament, that might not be the best time to try that out. But something like Minecraft, where it can be very repetitive and simple, and there's not necessarily a lot of consequences, especially in creative mode, right? Absolutely. Because how many times have I been struggling having a conversation with a student as a youth pastor? I put something in their hands that they can mess with, some Play-Doh, something to draw with, and they just open right up, and we're having conversations about serious stuff. Video games can be the same way. Again, not every game, but they can have that same potentiality, most certainly.
So Nick, from your perspective, it sounds like you're saying there's some positive things that can come from video games. What would be some benefits that you would see for students who play video games?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, I want to back up. I keep backing up. I want to back up again.
Yeah.
Right. So before we talk about some benefits, let's talk a little bit about why students play video games, or why we as humans are so attracted to video games. Because whether you know it or not, the video gaming community is only growing. And there's an incredible website out there. I'm actually going to pull up some of my notes because I can't remember the name of the website. Because I don't have to remember it because I put it on my notes. And here it is. It is Entertainment Software Association, ESA. ESA, Entertainment Software Association. They have some incredible numbers having to do with video games and gaming. I'm going to tell you just a few of those right now, a little bit.
Yeah.
But last year, the video gaming industry, in just 1 year, made over $53 billion. Wow. In 1 year, $53 billion. And roughly 65% of all adult Americans play video games of some kind. And as I've been talking about video games over the years, these numbers just keep going up. And actually, almost 50% of all gamers are women. And this website where I got this data, they define gamers as someone who is playing 13 hours or more of video games a week. That might be on a device, that might be on a console, on a PC, whatever it is, but 13 hours a week or more. 50% of them are women. That's pretty incredible. And over the whole world, at least just over 500 million people play video games in some form on a weekly basis. That's pretty incredible, right? These numbers are huge.
Yeah.
Why are people so attracted to games, right? This idea. And primarily there's kind of I think there's 5 main things that draw us towards gaming in this way. The first one is clear goals. We as human beings, we long to know what we're supposed to be doing, right? If your boss tells you, well, I need you to fill out those TPS reports, but you don't know how, you're like, well, it's not clear to me, or like, I need you to accomplish this thing. You're like, I don't know how. Like, that's frustrating, right? We need clear goals. And video games give us really clear goals, right? To accomplish. We also need unbreakable laws. This is something that God has built in us innately. Knew that, right? He gave Adam and Eve from the get-go. Here's some solid standards that you should live by. They were unsuccessful, and so he kept giving us more standards, not because he wanted to limit our freedom, but we know that we experience the best freedom when we're living within boundaries. Parents, adults, students that don't have boundaries or don't have rules, they're miserable, right? I've seen them at youth group over these 20 years. They're miserable. We need clear goals, set boundaries, and we flourish in those. It fosters creativity. It fosters creative thinking, and it fosters so much growth when we have clear and unbreakable rules, right? And we also crave instant feedback. We love being like knowing right away how good we're doing, and video games have that in spades all over the place, right? If you're suddenly laying down out of the game gone, well, that's some instant feedback that you weren't doing so well, right? You need to do a little bit different next time. We also have this, again, God-given innate desire to rule over a kingdom, to rule and reign over something. And we can, like, video games give that to us, whether it's Minecraft, we're making a whole universe, right? Or whatever it is, we're building and exploring and having our own thing to rule and reign over that, like, we kind of make into the image that we want. And lastly, this idea of voluntary participation, where we willingly jump into a community of people who have the same ideals, have the same goals, have the same viewpoints on some things when it comes to the game, and we can work on these things together, like World of Warcraft or City of Heroes, like I was talking about, or Fortnite, right? They're all in there together to kind of do this accomplish a goal together. And that's something that we see reflected absolutely from God, right? We're designed to be in community. We're designed to be a part of the church. And so these 5 reasons, clear goals, unbreakable laws, instant feedback, kingdom ruling, and voluntary participation, these things have been like built into us as part of the image of God. And video games have all 5 of those things. So of course, we're strongly attracted to them. They're working to meet some of the needs that God has given us innately. Now, if we're working to have all of our needs met through video games, clearly that's a problem, right? Because God wants to meet those needs in us and through us and for us, not just through video games, right? So before we answer your question, Eric, I wanted to have a clear goal about why we're even so attracted to games to begin with. So those 5 big things really draw us into games. An incredible video game will have all 5 of those. An okay one might have 1 or 2, but one that just sucks everybody in, we'll have all 5 of those.
That's awesome. That's really good, Nick. Yeah, that's helpful. So I think that's important to understand as adults of why our students maybe are getting pulled into some of these games. And even if we're honest, and I love that you gave some of those statistics from that website, because our phones and the games that we as adults may play, while it's not on PlayStation or Xbox, it looks different, but those same components are there. And
Yes.
so the games that we play as adults, or as mom and dad, that suck you in, Bejeweled or whatever game you play,
Candy Crush.
Yeah, Candy Crush.
Yeah, whatever they are.
Those same components can be there. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, most certainly.
Good. So Nick, one last question for you. What would be a way that we can leverage video games for the gospel? We talk about wanting to do that in everything. We said at the beginning of our conversation here today, anything can be evil, right? If we allow it to be to an extreme or to have rule and reign over us. But how do we leverage video games for the gospel? How would you encourage the adults watching this to do that?
Yeah, such a great question. As a follower of Christ, we are called to be disciples and to make disciples. And that goes in all areas of our life. That includes video games. Here's a couple of examples. So playing City of Heroes all those years, obviously I developed some online relationships. And I ran a super group, kind of like a guild. There's a group of players that we all played together and did a bunch of stuff. And as we played together over the years, they knew I was a youth pastor, and they knew I was a Christian. And we had conversations. We'd talk about real life stuff together. And I would ask them, hey, how's that going? You mentioned you were out the other week because so-and-so was sick. I've been praying for you. How did that go? And they would come to me with prayer requests, and I could share my faith with them. And I could share the gospel with them because of the relationships we had through this video game that I never would have met them in real life. I don't know who they are. I still don't know what their real names are. I don't know. But what an incredible way to witness and to share the love of Christ with people all over the world, right in my own living room. A few weeks ago, I was playing a game. I can't remember, and it doesn't matter what it was, but it was another game where you could jump in and do a raid. You could fight some bad guys together, right? Kind of not use only gamer language here for everybody that doesn't necessarily know what a raid is. Fight a bunch of bad guys together. And as we were doing this, I found out the 2 people that were in this group with me, they were engaged and they were excited about being married. And I told them I was a pastor, and we just had this whole conversation. And before we're done, I got to pray with them and talk about finding church and how to help them find a good church that is going to be Bible focused and gospel centered. It was awesome. It was great. We can have these conversations as we're playing games with people online. And now, if you're not a gamer, if you don't play games, I think what we talked about before, using games as a way to build relationships into the life of a student is so powerful. I can't tell you the number of times a student has come to youth group or to my house or something, and they're just really shut down. They kind of ignore all the adults, kind of introverted or withdrawn or whatever it is. And I sit down with them and say, hey, what games are you playing right now? They perk right up, oh, I'm doing this game and this game and this game. Awesome. How are you doing in that? And obviously I know some things, so I can ask some specific follow-up questions, but the more you know, the more specific questions you can ask. So you just kind of know about the culture of gaming. You can use that to leverage relationships. And we can't effectively share Christ without relationship. I mean, God himself modeled that best, right? He became one of us and spent 30 years on earth as a human building relationships just to share the gospel, right? We have to have relationships to share truth. Otherwise, it's so ineffective. Yeah. So if we can leverage video games even if we don't play, to just kind of know a little bit about what's popular, what's going on right now, or to ask a student, hey, what's popular right now? What have you been playing? Tell me about that. Why do you like it? That's awesome. How far are you? And we can build those relationships to leverage the gospel.
Nick, that's so good, because you're talking about finding a connection, a connecting point
Yes.
with them. Even in the example that you gave of this couple that was engaged, like that's exactly what you did. You used God talk in a way, and not every student or youth worker is going to be able to say, "Oh, I'm a pastor," and
Right.
play that card, but still to say, "Hey, how can I pray for you?" And those are amazing ways to connect with people. That through video games, you're actually you telling that story reminded me of a guy that was on our youth staff. He was a volunteer in our youth ministry in Frederick, Maryland, and he served on our youth staff. He had a heart for reconnecting students that had lost connection with the church. They stopped coming to our youth ministry. They they got dragged away by X, Y, or Z. He would pursue them by playing video games. He would find out, hey, they're playing Call of Duty. He would go join them. He even found out, like, the chat room. I don't know how it works, but the rooms that he would get invited to go play games with them online. And while they were on, he would ask them, hey, I've missed seeing you guys at youth group. Would love to see you come back. And he was so good at re-engaging our students, because he'd stay up till, and he was a married guy with 3 kids of his own, and he would play video games with them, and he saw that as his ministry. There were times where he would even disciple some of our student leaders, and I would ask the question, like, when did you last meet with them? And he's like, well, I chatted with them while we were playing Call of Duty or while we were playing video. I'm like, that's amazing to see that he had that heart. He leveraged it as a way to connect with students. So it's definitely possible.
Yeah, it sure is. Mm-hmm.
Well, Nick, one question that came in, you talked about ways that adults, we can engage with students, but what are some things that you'd caution parents or youth leaders not to do when it comes to engaging their students? Anything there?
Yeah, I think, again, I already said the phrase, actually learned this phrase at Grace College in our student ministry program there, but the phrase of rules without relationship results in rebellion, right? As adults, as parents, as authorities, when we just give arbitrary rules without engaging and understanding, it results in rebellion, right? We've seen that. And the same is true in the world of video games. So parents, adults, yeah, we would be wise to help the next generation understand how to have self-control and to limit. And we're really bad at that as Americans, right? Because if a kid is playing basketball, we let him play basketball 12, 15 hours a day because it's healthy and good for him, right? It's an idol is the same way anything else could be an idol. So I think we have to help our students learn self-discipline, self-control, and help engage them. So what's a healthy amount to be playing? What games are really just too inappropriate to play and really just shouldn't even be tried to be redeemed for the sake of the gospel? Because there's some out there that they're not okay. Like Eric said, anything, like you said, anything can be bad, anything can be used to leverage the gospel. So I think throwing out rules without having conversation can be dangerous and helpful. And sometimes as a parent or an adult, yeah, you do need to put your foot down sometimes and say, no, this is it. I said 3 hours a day. This is what we talked about together. We're sticking to that. You're still the parent. You're still the adult. But make sure when those regulations or what game is being played, how much is being played, have those conversations together so that the student can hear your heart about why, instead of just because I said so, but really, why? Why do you only want your student to play so many hours a day? Or why don't you want your student to play this game? Have a conversation about it. Talk about it. Engage with them about it.
Awesome. That's so good. Thank you, Nick. I'm sure we could keep talking. I know you have been the Momentum Youth Conference guy that's done these power tracks for students, for youth workers. So I love your heart. I love seeing and hearing your passion come through, and just even how God's used you in this effectiveness of reaching gamers and helping to train and equip adults who are working with them. So thank you so much for this time, for joining us in this conversation today. It's important. It's important to think through.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you, Eric. It was great being here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, Nick, why don't we do this? Why don't we just close in prayer? And if you would pray for our parents, our adults, especially, who, their hearts are in the right place, but maybe they're not really sure how to engage students or where to start in that.
Yeah, I'd love to. God, thank you for who you are. God, thanks for technology. It has brought us some incredible things and some things that are confusing. God, I want to ask that you would help all of our parents, our youth pastors out here, our adults, help them to know how to wisely engage with the next generation, or how to use self-control and wisdom in their own lives with the games they're playing. God, we all need regulation. We all need self-discipline. And that's one of part of the fruit that you give us, God, as followers of you. So help us to use it in our own lives, and help us to know how to encourage students to use it as well. In all areas, God, not just video games, but everything, no matter what it is. We're so good at making idols out of everything. So, God, use us to reach the next generation, whatever it takes, whatever it takes. God, if that means getting involved with a game that we think is really dumb, that's okay. That's all right. God, help us set ourselves aside and to prioritize the young generations. Help us love you more. In Jesus' name, amen.